Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retention Chronicles. Today, we are joined by Chuck Bowen, founder and CEO of Mission Mercantile. Thank you so much for joining us, Chuck. I'm so excited to have you. It's going to be a great chat.
My pleasure, Mariah. I'm excited about this.
Yes, I'm so excited you took the invite. I thought it would be great just to have you give a background on yourself, on your company as well, for our listeners who might not be super familiar.
Well, I'm a little oddball, I think, in our industry because this is kind of my second or third career, I guess.
Mhm.
The first 17 years was typical corporate. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, Georgia Tech grad, spent almost 10 years with Procter and Gamble, and then did another 6.5 or so years just in corporate, high tech, startups, turnarounds, that sort of thing. And then that got me to 2001, where I was traveling so much and spending so much time on, with new ventures, moving and all that, that I just needed to stop that and focus on my family, And we had a small child at the time, little baby girl, 2.5 years old. So just decided to just leave all of that, which I did, and struck out on the entrepreneur route. And so for the first few years of that, I was a business coach. Well, a few years, for probably about 12 or 13 years, I was a business coach, business and personal coach. Worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of different companies, helping them navigate between, viability to sustainability and growth, from restaurants to doctors' offices to e-commerce companies, a little bit in between. And that's what got me eventually into leather goods,
Mm,
coaching them, and then became the CEO of that leather goods company for a little over 6 years. Ran
wow.
them, very successful online, built our own leather factory in Mexico. Just had a lot of fun with it, and then ended up selling my interest in that company, in that factory, to the owner in 2014, I guess it was. And then we launched Mission Mercantile in 2015. So been a little bit of a path.
Yes, I think that's what's most interesting about learning about someone is I feel like no path is a straight arrow.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
I yeah, before we even got on this call, I was telling you about my background as well. And I think it's so beneficial to be able to bounce around and take your learnings from different areas, different spaces, and then apply that because that's what I feel like, at least for me, that's where creativity and you get all the different perspectives of different teammates with different backgrounds. You're able to apply all those different learnings together.
100%. In fact, when I ventured into entrepreneurialism, I didn't even think I was going to be an entrepreneur. I just thought
Mm,
it was a bridge, maybe a bridge for a time to my next traditional, kind of job or corporate job or whatever. Because I loved what I was doing when I left high tech and telecommunications. I absolutely loved it. I loved the startup and the turnaround environment. It was just addictive. So I thought entrepreneurship was a way for me to stay where I was, allow me to focus on my family, which was really the impetus for me making the change in the first place. And then maybe bridge that into something else. But then as I got further and further into entrepreneurship and really working with mainly small and medium sized businesses, and then getting literally right there in the ditch with them, what I realized and I started coaching them on was there's only one place you can start, and that's where
mm,
you are right now. So every every story, I think every journey is unique in that way, because you're kind of taking what you have to work with. And the one thing that helped me was because I didn't really limit the type of businesses I was working with, because I had worked for huge corporations like Procter and Gamble, and then I worked for very small companies that were family owned businesses, and almost everything in between. It was fun to kind of take the best of those pieces, curate what was the best fit for that owner, for that entrepreneur, and then walk it out, you know,
mm.
and then everybody's learned from it. So the whole key is just to do more things right that work than things that didn't, and stop doing those things right. So
Yeah, yes. I think that's such a great point. And I love that you added in that you thought entrepreneurship was going to be one thing, and then it bridges into like that it was going to bridge maybe these two parts of your life.
I just thought it was going to be a short-term thing.
Right.
I'll do this for a second. I've never done this. I don't know where to begin. Where do I start? I don't know anybody hardly in this town much. What am I going to do? Right. But
Hmm.
it turned into its whole thing because if you're a builder and you like to create and build things, it's really intriguing the whole path of entrepreneurship anyway. Just trying to figure out that next step and don't ruin good enough with perfect. And,
Mm.
but then again, don't be this carte blanche, thoughtless risk taker who's just trying on new things all the time. You got to have a little thoughtfulness about it, right?
Hmm.
But there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. So
Yeah. So is it fair to say then that you weren't always entrepreneurial in spirit, correct? It kind of just found you.
that is a good. Let me answer the question. I know one of the things you want to know is the background of how Mission
Hmm.
Mercantile got started, and so you may be unaware of it, but that's a perfect segue into that. Um, Initially, I would say I would have answered that question. No, wasn't an entrepreneur. I
Hmm.
didn't think that because I never saw my upbringing, my dad and my family in particular, as being entrepreneurial until I thought about it and looked at it later when I was
Okay.
actually starting up, probably Mission Mercantile at the time. The reason I say that was, you can read the story on the website, but
I
my dad,
did. Full
yeah,
disclosure, yes.
exactly.
It's a wonderful one.
Yeah, my dad owned what at the time was known as a hardware store,
Hmm.
which we chose Mercantile to be in the business name because that's a old school, more of original term for a hardware business. So hardware really meant hard goods, like anything from nails and concrete blocks and lumber, maybe all the way down to dishes and plates and appliances and that sort of thing. So that was what my dad offered. And on the website, there's actually a picture there of an early 1950s photograph. It's actually the one back here
I love
behind
that.
me, and my dad is right there on the far end. That's my dad, the young guy.
Wow.
So when I grew up in the business, literally, I mean, that was the first location. He ended up buying some property across the road in this small town of Claxton, Georgia. 3,000 people lived there, and enlarged on it. Made it had his store, and then the warehouse where he had building supplies and stored lumber and insulation, all that kind of good stuff, feed and seed. But I never thought him as an entrepreneur. I just thought him as
Mm.
a, you know, my dad,
Yeah, right.
because that was part of it. And then when we finished there every day, and he shut the store down, it closed at 5 o'clock. We'd go out to the farm. We lived on about a 200-acre farm, and then we farmed until it turned dark and on the weekend. So it was always hardware or always farm. And we were doing both of those things, literally almost 24 hours a day, it seemed like,
Hmm.
and that was the life. Again, never thought of him as an entrepreneur at all. I thought him as a small business owner. So when we launched Mission Mercantile and I went back and thought about the story of it and what it meant, I also went a little deeper and started realizing that on both sides of my family, my aunts and uncles, my grandfathers, their fathers, my great grandfathers, they were all merchants. And they were
Mm.
all from pharmacists, owned their own little pharmacies, own their own grocery stores, own their own little mercantile businesses. My granddad, my mom's dad, actually owned a little taxi service coming out of World War II for
Oh.
a while. They just did all these things entrepreneurially. And of course, I always knew that. And I always remember when we got together as a family, little family get togethers, reunions on both sides. I always knew that, most all of them were self-employed in some way, but I never thought entrepreneur. I never, stamped that label on them. But when I thought about it and looked about it, and I went, I was actually the oddball, and my sister was the oddball because she became a nurse, and an RN, and now she's a nurse practitioner. She took the traditional route, but most of my other cousins and all them, most of them went the entrepreneur route. And so I realized maybe I'm the oddball black sheep. And then Mission Mercantile kind of,
And yeah, and now you're here.
now I'm here. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm so glad you gave us the whole background because like I had said, I did read your story on your website and I found it to be very authentic, very transparent and very like homey almost of
Thank
I
you.
was like thinking back to my grandparents and my mom was raised on a farm and her dad, so my grandfather ran their business and I think that leads into a lot of the things that I wanted to talk to you about because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your branding is very much almost timeless and going back to your father and paying respects to him and um all the things that you saw as a child that at the time you're not recognizing this is how a business operates and this is not entrepreneurial in spirit because you don't recognize that. But then later in life, when you're, like you said, you're able to reflect on that, there's a lot of power to that. And so I
Yes.
thought it was a beautiful, almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? A beautiful tie between the two, right? And like sharing the images
Yes.
of your family. Um, yeah, it kind of it's very sentimental in the way it resonates with the
Yes.
end consumer of the content.
That word you used just a minute ago, I think authentic. Of course, that's a big buzzword. It has been for a while now.
Yes, yeah.
I think it means different things to different people. But, if you substitute the word real or, like you said, timeless, that thing that's inside of you that is, it's natural, I guess you'd say to some, those are the most powerful journeys or stories you can share, especially when they end up giving birth to maybe a business or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's true for us with Mission Mercantile. As I went back and really thought, fella that helped me out with this tremendously, who's actually one of our team members initially, is a guy named Jimmy Gibson.
Mm.
And Jimmy is phenomenal at brand. He's a brand master, so to speak. So we spent so many hours just kind of developing the concept, because one of the criteria initially would be that it would need to be authentic. It wouldn't
Mm.
be something that we'd have to create. So anything from the story that you had, even to our logo and the
Mm-hmm.
handshake and everything else that we do, the Mission Mercantile name, the three-legged stool that we stand on, so to speak. We'll talk about that in a little bit, I guess. It's true. One of the things I realized as you were just talking about your family growing up a farm and the things you think about was the fact that now when I go back to the family farm, we still own it. We have 200
That's
acres
wonderful.
there that my sister and I own together. And then my mom, who's still alive, has another 800 acres, 15, 20 miles away in another county. So there's about 1,000 acres there. And the thing that hits me every time, it still hits me, is that when I go onto the farm and I'm working, I'm on a tractor, or I'm messing with something, cleaning up one of our barns, whatever we're doing there, right? Is I think I just stop and I realize that because of we have enough acres, there's some remote feeling to it, right?
Mm.
You may be there, I may be there by myself, nobody else, and I'm working, and I go, my gosh, this is so peaceful. This is like entrepreneurialism. And it's according to how you look at, there's two sides to every coin, how you look at it. One is, as an entrepreneur, you're alone, right?
Mm.
And there's definitely that feeling, I can tell you that. That feeling of being alone, like, am I the only person here? Hello. And you're going it alone. And then you realize, well, you're really not. It depends on who you have around you, surround yourself with. But there's definitely that side of the coin where you feel alone often.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other side of the coin where, though, you're going, yeah, but I get to choose what I'm doing right now. And there's not a lot of people or anybody that I'm screaming at me like, you need to go do this and you need to go get on this tractor and you
Mm-hmm.
need to go do that. As an entrepreneur, as a farmer, as a merchant, whatever, you're really kind of looking at what do I need to do. And so it's really important to figure out what matters most. not just what matters, but what matters most and what you're going to give yourself to. But there's a release in that. And there's this feeling for me of peace of, I don't have all these other noise around me, just kind of distracting me. And I realized that's where I grew up, on the farm
Mm.
and in the hardware business. There wasn't this noise going on all the time. There just wasn't that noise of distraction. It was really more of, what do I need to be focusing on and what I need to be doing. And I don't think you get that in any other way except through entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I love that you expressed both sides of the coin for having it be more of a solo job and having like it's nice that you don't have that noise. And I think that's such a lovely way of putting
It's
it.
according to how you look at it.
Mhm.
It's to a good friend of mine who's an author, a very close friend of mine. His name's Dan Miller. And he's written numerous books, but the one he's most famous book for is one that's called 48 Days to the Work You Love.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Dan talks about and is the fact that opportunities are either how you look at it. Nowhere, you're on that one side of the coin when you're all alone, you're going, where am I going to make my next dollar? How am I going to get my next customer? There's nowhere opportunities. Or he said the other side of the coin is that they're now here. And
Mm.
that's the way I like to look at it is, all these opportunities are now here. How am I going to curate those opportunities and pick the ones that, based on my limited time, money, resources, I'm going to give myself or give our team to? That's
How do
the
you,
most important part. Yeah.
yeah, is there any, because I know it's such a big question, but is there any, like metric or what's your rationale but behind choosing what is the most important thing? Is it like what can I get done the fastest that'll have the most benefit or value for our team? Like how do you try and even attempt to measure that?
That depends someone on what is the outcome you're trying to achieve,
Mm,
right?
okay.
So right now, if all of a sudden my shirt caught on fire, probably the most important thing I'm going to do is put that thing out, pause the podcast. Let's not, burn myself, that sort of thing. So it
Yes.
really depends on what you're after. So I think that's the first thing to decide on in your business is, currently at this moment in time, what is most important. And I think that so many people get wrapped up into their, you know, 3 to 5 year, outlook, which is really important to look at to kind of know where you're going. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan, so he says begin with the end in mind, right?
Mm,
So where am I going to be there? But I think sometimes the most overlooked thing is, what am I going to be needing to be doing to achieve my short term 6 month, 6 to 12 month goals? So maybe I need to increase my bottom line profit. Okay. Or maybe I need to create and expand on my brand awareness, right? Or I need to launch a new product. If you have limited resources, which most of us smaller entrepreneurs have, we have to decide. And the way Stephen Covey said it, he said, some things matter, other things matter more. But what is most important is to be able to tell the difference.
mm,
So I think that
love that.
choosing aspect is where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. They have in front of them all these things that matter, but they really struggle with trying to decide on what matters more and what am I going to give myself to. Sometimes the decisions you make kind of support a chain of events. So in other words, if there's an important goal of expanding my profitability, maybe there's something you need to do right now that it will help you to that, such as launch a new product. So you have some newness to promote to your existing customer base. Or maybe instead of focusing on driving more and more and more people to your website, for example, or to your store, focus for a time on how I'm going to convert them at a higher rate. Because if you can bump your conversion rate, that is the tide that rises all the ships,
Mm-hmm.
version of them. So I think it really is trying to dissect of all the what you deemed as the most important things or the important things. What is the most important things, and then make sure you have the resources to give it. So I'd rather you focus on one thing than five things if you have limited resources, one or two
Yeah.
things, so you don't starve the other ones of what they need, and then focus and get her done and then move on to the next one, rather than having 5 or 10 things you're trying to go down the path at one time. None of them get across the goal line, and you literally die in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. You won't make it across that goal line,
You
right?
won't make it across the goal line. Get something across the goal line. As Seth Godin says, ship it, ship.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to call out. And it reminded me, especially as you were just talking through converting at a higher rate or, making sure that okay, I want to have this goal. So I need to launch a new product or I need to work on branding. One of the things that we come across a lot on this podcast specifically, but just also with Malomo in general, is the importance of customer retention and making sure that just because someone, had a first purchase with you or just because, they seem to be a loyal consumer with your brand, it doesn't mean that, someone hits the buy button and you're done, right? You cross that
Right.
finish line.
That's the starting
So
point. Yeah.
right. Okay. I'm glad to hear you say that. We've also had many guests say that same thing. And I want to, the question for you here is, I feel like that focus on customer retention is something that is newer or there's more importance on it now. Like we're waking up to the fact that acquisition costs are really high. The
Mhm.
importance of focusing on retention to make sure that, once you get that first purchase, your customer is happy is, like you said, the start.
Yes.
So have you found that in your experience, customer retention is becoming to be more important, or have you always found it in who you're working with and your approach that it's always been important?
It's the latter. It's always been important. Now,
Okay.
let me tell you a couple of things I think that have driven people to think, well, now it's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, I
Okay.
would love that.
All right. So, first of all, your acquisition cost, you're saying it's getting higher and higher and higher. My perspective is it's always been high.
Mm,
Because if you look at your conversion rate or your return on ad spend, let's just say your return on investment,
hmm.
if that bottom number is how much you spent and that top number is how much you earn, like a sale, if that top number is zero or really little, your acquisition cost or percentage is almost infinite.
Hmm. Yeah.
So zero over
Almost the
anything
whole
is
thing. Yeah.
almost the whole thing.
Hmm.
So, if they ask me, so what's my highest cost acquisition channel? And it's like the ones where you're converting the smallest number.
Mm, hmm.
But that's extremely costly for you. And you need to either get better at it or you need to stop it, at least temporarily, or find somebody who can be better at it than you are, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So then that brings you to customer retention, right? Which I think now kind of segues back into the three-legged stool I mentioned to you a few minutes ago.
Hmm.
I think every company needs to have a three-legged stool, because one-legged stools, you can't really sit on that. Two, you fall off of, and three, you got a solid base, right? So our three-legged stool is remarkable product, because you got to have something worth buying,
Hmm.
especially at a higher average order value that we have. The second one is a remarkable promise. Nobody wants to buy a piece of crap or something that won't last. So you need
Hmm.
to stand behind it. And if you can't stand behind it, you shouldn't even offer it.
Hmm.
So that's number two. The third one, though, is what I think is the thing that really separates us at Mission Mercantile. I think we're pretty good at the first two. I think we're really good at the last one, which is what we call mythical customer care. And we've even kind of trademarked it, mythical customer care, because how you treat your customer all along the path, or your potential customer, whether they're a suspect, they just heard about you, a prospect, they even come to your website or your store to check you out, or they bought from you, suspect, prospect, customer, you've got to take great care of them all along the way. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't forget about them after they bought from you, because you got to remember they're your absolute best referral source, and
Yes.
also the potential that they'll buy from you again. Or simply, as it was in my dad's hardware business, you may even know them. They're in your local community. It's a small community. So you got to build relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think customer retention and how you treat them, whether it's good or bad, Marriott, excuse me, the hospitality chain
Very similar words.
of Marriott, exactly. They said they would become famous for saying, we'd almost rather somebody have a negative experience with one of our hotels or properties than not have one at all, because it gets
Mm,
us the ability to show them how we can make it right and take great care of them. So, of course, like Marriott, we don't create bad experiences. But if somebody has a product where something happened with the strap, or the leather had a thing on it, or whatever, because it's all, natural products and handcrafted, we're going to take great care of them,
mm-hmm.
after the sale, and treat them. Everybody says treat them like family. Well, I don't really go along with that, because everybody's got some family member that's not exactly the guy or gal you want calling you today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But treat them not only how you would like to be treated, right? But better. Always go first. When you're building trust, like between you and I, somebody's got to go first.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to go first, kick in that law of reciprocity, which says if I do something really nice for you, if you're the right kind of person I want to have a relationship, you probably want to do something nice for me, or even nicer for me. So
Yeah.
it's
I'm a big
my
fan of law of reciprocity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know it, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you go
Mm-hmm.
first. You go first. So
Yep.
that's our vibe, and that's how we roll at Mission Mercantile.
Yeah. And I've observed that as well. Just from interacting with your brand and your website before having met you, and now obviously having met you. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that, just personally, and also, how
Yes,
I personally go through life daily, but then also on the brand side of things with Malomo, like that's our number one core
yes.
value is be relationship obsessed and always trying to lead.
Relationship obsessed, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Like,
make it easy for people to contact you and talk with you.
mhm.
And so we do text, we do chat, we do email. We really shock people with phone calls, because they'll email us or text us, and if we got their number, we'll pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Joshua, it's Chuck at Mission Mercantile," and we talk them through it, and they go, "Well, is this something can happen?" And if I'm talking to them, I go, "Well, I happen to be the founder, the owner, so I
I think I can make something happen.
take care of it." But all of our folks are anointed in the same way, so we're usually, especially if there's a problem, we're going to pick up the phone and call you. When was the last time you had a brand that called you, Mariah?
I
Actually,
can confidently say I don't think ever.
you can't even get them on the phone in the first place, much less
Hmm.
call you back out of the blue. So that's the way we roll, and we always look for ways to kind of expand on that. So, give you an example. When the pandemic initially hit, I first thought this is an opportunity for us to help our existing customers know that we haven't forgotten about you, even in
Hmm.
this world turmoil that's going on, right? So, what we did is we picked a few hundred of our very best customers, and we sent them free gifts without telling
Wow.
them we were going to do that.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
And we had a couple of funny responses. A couple were shocked, like, oh my gosh. And a couple of them were kind of not real happy to begin with, like, hey,
Mm.
I didn't order this. And did you charge my card? And so we
Interesting.
called them and we said, oh no, we just it's a complimentary gift. They go, oh my gosh, nobody's done that for me before, just out of the blue. And I go, well, how do you take great care of your customers, especially your best customers, than by doing something nice for them? John Maxwell said it in this way, and he's got his different levels of influence. And he wrote a book called Becoming a Person of Influence. And he's one of my favorite authors. And the very first level of influence is, what would you do for someone if you knew you had absolutely nothing to gain?
Mm. Wow.
And that's hard to think of, because most of us say, well, I did something nice for them, but probably I had something to gain for that, and but what would you do if you thought you had absolutely nothing to gain? And that should be kind of the base foundation level of trying to influence another. What would you do just because you were going to take great care of them? Maybe that would make you mythical. And what if you had 100, 200, 300 people who thought about you in that way and they told somebody else? What would that do for your business?
Mm-hmm.
Just put yourself out there.
Yeah. And I'm so happy you shared those stories, Chuck. And that's amazing that during such a crazy, you know,
It was nuts.
uncertain time during the
I know.
pandemic.
Everybody stopped advertising. Everybody kind of batten down the hatches and
Mm-hmm.
raised their prices and did all these things. And I'm sitting there thinking, how do we take great care of them? Send them $150 washback. Send them
Mm-hmm.
something really nice just out of the blue. And by the whatever you do, don't tell them before, so it's a surprise. It's like, wow. I know that when I've gotten some of those from people, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So
Yeah. It
think
leaves a
about
lasting
things.
impression. There's
It
no
doesn't
doubt
it?
about it.
Doesn't
Yeah.
it? It
Yeah.
does.
That's so powerful. And I think, on the off chances that, free product or like a free gift comes up in this podcast, I've seen, maybe I don't know about the actual split, but people debate a bit of like how effective is it really when you're talking about how your customers view you as a brand or how they shop with you? Like, does it really make the difference? And I think that's, maybe one of the larger
Yes.
questions of like how it's branding and like a lot of other marketing initiatives and customer experience is so
Yes.
much like it is so much because it's closely tied to just your
Yes.
emotions and your feelings in general, which is
That's right.
already hard enough to quantify. That's I've heard that
You got to live it
argument.
out. Yeah, you can't just say it on your website
Mm-hmm.
and just say it even verbally. You have to live it. So, good example of when I was coaching other companies, and we do the same thing in our own company. And I go, okay, so what do you want to be paid for? And they go, I
Mm.
want to be paid for my lawn service. I want to be paid for the pizza that I'm delivering. I'm paying for whatever. I go, great. You know, then that means all the other stuff you have on the table is potential things you can give away. Okay.
Wow, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
So, for example, we know authentically we're very patriotic. My dad was in the service, my grandfather's in the service, my uncle's in the service, all these people were in the service, right? So we're very patriotic with our military, first responder. My sister's a nurse. Her two sons are EMT firefighters, right? They got
Wow.
all these, and I've got other people in pharmacists and nurse practitioners and nurses and all this stuff. So we're big fans of first responders, law enforcement, first responders, patriot, military active and veterans. So we offer all of them a lifetime discount on our product.
Mm.
Anytime they want it, if a sale's going on and there's a higher discount, they can get that. But if there's nothing going on, they want our product, they can always, put down their discount code and get a free product, get a discount on a product. And sometimes we give them things away for free. So, put your money where your mouth is, but act on it. Do something about it to be that person of influence. Even if you had nothing to gain, what would you do? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and from that fun causes that you believe in, and donate to them. We donate to all sorts of causes that we believe in. Hometown heroes that do special events for people who've been hurt or had trauma
Mm-hmm.
in certain lines of service, and they do things for them. And another one that touches my heart is, adoption, orphanage related, because myself and my brother are adopted at,
Mm.
at, at near birth. And my sister was adopted also, but another family. So we do things for those, and they mean a lot to me. Now, I don't also think it's necessary for a company to tell the whole world what you're doing, because in my belief system, often you keep that private, right? because whatever you do in public, you know, is, you know, do you get the real benefit in eternity if you're just always saying, so here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm doing, we believe in this. And I don't dismiss or diss any company that does that, because I think that's great and drawing attention to those causes. We just choose to do it privately.
Yeah. Like that's your way. That's your branding. That's
That's
what you
just our
stand
brand, and that's our
behind.
way.
Hmm.
So whether you do it publicly or do it privately, I'm cool with either way. Just do it.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
be abundant. Don't have a scarcity mentality. Be abundant in what you do, and tell people your secrets. I mean, the whole world is literally your marketplace. So give
Hmm.
away the good stuff. If you've got good advice or good learnings, or you made a bad mistake, don't do that. Help other
Yeah.
people know it. Don't keep it to yourself, you know.
I like to think that's what we're doing as we sit here, and
I hope
you're
so.
you're
Yeah.
actively doing so. Yeah. um and I also love that you said like be abundant and don't have a scarcity mentality or have a scarcity model.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties back into branding and just the customer experience and customer retention. And one of the things that ran through my mind was it's easy to forget about the person behind the screen when you're online in e-commerce and you're not in retail. So how do you've mentioned like a couple of the ways that you are making sure you stay connected and stay abundant, give abundance where you can with your customers in the free gifts that you've given out and donations, and the communication style that you have
Mm.
in that you're making or you're trying your best to take care of, what was it, the prospect, customer, what was the first one you said?
Suspect,
Suspect. Yes, I haven't heard that
prospect,
before. Yeah.
customer. Yeah, suspect. Most people are suspects. It's like if you're
Like
marketing
heard of
Facebook
them.
ad or anything else,
Hmm.
they haven't even heard of you yet. So you kind of just went across the screen. They're a suspect. They're not a prospect until they actually take an action, maybe
Hmm.
come to your website or stop by your store or give you a call. Then they've, and that's your only goal with advertising. Ultimately, you want them to buy, of course.
Hmm.
But your first step is to turn them from a suspect to a prospect. Get them
Right.
to a place where they can see your service or your product, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that leads wonderfully into my question of how are you thinking about changing someone to a suspect to a prospect with
Uh,
like your ads? Like how are you that can just be one example, but how are you thinking about that from more maybe like a technical level of,
yeah.
what's the messaging that you're using or what have you found to be effective?
Well, let me go back to the three-legged stool.
Please
Remarkable
do.
product. Okay.
Hmm.
So your visuals, the product you're displaying has to be head turning to
Mm.
your prospect, may not to someone else. I mean, if they're hungry at night and it's midnight and they're looking for where's the closest place I can buy chocolate ice cream, maybe if a leather bag popped up, they're going, okay, but I'm on chocolate ice cream. I'm not
Yeah.
looking for, you know, bags. You understand that, but it has to
Hmm.
be compelling. So remarkable product. I think the second thing is the remarkable promise. If I buy this, am I going to feel smart about buying it a year later, 10 years later, 20 years later? We give a remarkable promise, which says if this product fails due to craftsmanship or materials, we're going to make it right. We're either going to repair it or replace it, make it right. Okay. And then the third thing is the mythical customer care. And I think part of mythical customer care is also building trust with
Mm.
that. And so we know with a product priced where we are, you know, we know our demographic is literally from 25 to 65 and it's solid all the way across. It's interesting how solid it is as far as interest. So the main thing is how can we, you know, build trust along that path? And so that's why every contact we have is as personal as we can make it. And we also tell them more and more about ourselves, because remember, until they really engage with you and bought, they're still kind of hovering from afar. They're kind of behind a almost a one-way glass where they can see you but you can't see them, right?
Mm.
So what do you want to tell them to build trust and that you have a remarkable product? Well, we tell them things like we're one of the very unique companies out there that actually owns their supply chain. So we actually hand select all of our materials. leather, wax canvas, the threads, the linings. We hand select those things and craft them into your product. Literally, somebody right now, or a week or a month or a year from now, is going to be handcrafting your product for you. So we want you to know that as much of that as we can own, we do that. So we have it all the way up. And there's very few brands in our niche, leather goods and accessories and travel and all that, that actually do that. Most of them outsource maybe their product development, their production, all of that they outsource to someone else. And we actually make for about 2 or 3 dozen other brands. So we know that they outsource to us. We make for them in our own factory. So that's one thing. And then as you go up that chain, we also own much of our distribution. So we direct to consumer website. We also do corporate gifting. We work with promotional companies, and we also do wholesale. We're in about 450 stores, and we have very close relationships with those stores that sell our products. We take great care of them, answer questions. If they have a customer that had an issue, they refer them to us, send them to us, and we take great care of them to maybe do a repair or something else that they may have had a question about. We do that. So we do that. So we kind of have this vertical orientation. Not only do we do that for ourselves, but for many of the other brands we work with, I also had discussions like this with them and helping them understand how to grow their brand and how to, sidestep or whatever a problem that they may have. We just want to be abundant with it. So that makes us unique in the space. And I know a few of maybe no other brands that look at it that way, that are around today.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that you own your own supply chain as a way of building trust, because I know I
As
wanted
much as you
to.
can own anything, right?
Yes, yeah, air quotes 100%.
Air quotes, right?
Yes, because I know it was one of the questions that I had, and um the conversation was just flowing, so I was like, I don't think we're going to get to that, but I'm glad we snuck it in within the last couple of minutes, because I think, I haven't come across a brand myself of that I know that they completely own their own supply chain, and air quotes again, to the point that you can. And I think, just as I put myself, step away from my marketing manager role or hat, and I look at more my consumer experience, I know that bodes trust in me personally, because the aspect of having control over something is probably one of the most desirable things for a consumer to hear, because you know that the person you're talking to, or the person who calls you, like Chuck, you had mentioned calling someone up and saying, like, I am the founder, how can I help you, or how can I turn this experience into a better one. It does bode that trust in that someone can say, like, oh, we are trying to make sure, be proactive about the materials that we're using and the process that we're going through. Nothing's going to be 100% perfect all the time, right?
Right.
But if you can take that and say, when something happens, if, whatever, the material isn't up to grade, or something happens that the craftsmanship, it loses a stitching or something like that, you can fix
Yes.
it. That has a lot of power behind the branding, behind the product, and
It
behind the customer experience, like
it
you said.
does. It's tremendous. You made me think of this little parable about, the guy or gal walking down the beach and throwing starfish back into the ocean,
Mm. Oh
you
my
know,
gosh. Yep.
and somebody comes up and say, "Oh gosh, there's thousands of starfish on the beach. You can't throw possibly all of them out, can you?" Get no, but I do it because to that one starfish, it's really important. I did
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah,
So
the
we
individual. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we know that whenever we can get a chance to interact like this, and if I can do it on Zoom, I love doing it on Zoom with a customer. They know that at that moment, they have 100% of my or one of our team members' attention,
Mm-hmm.
and that they are important. And from a bigger perspective, remember, when you're marketing, you don't market to demographics or to groups, or you market to an individual. It's the
Mm-hmm.
individual that really matters the most in that, right? So we want them to know that, and we want them to know that that's authentic for us, is that attention.
Yeah. No, it's actually so funny. One of my friends brought up the starfish metaphor parable
Uh-huh.
literally yesterday. So it's very fresh in my mind. So that's
Well,
that's
you know
great
what's
that you brought it
shocking
up.
to me? You know, it's
Uh-huh.
what's shocking to me is how shocking it is because when if I'm actually helping out in customer care, if there's something that one of our team members said, "Hey, could you call this person because you maybe have the best insights?" And my
Hmm.
team is all well knowledgeable, they know, right?
Yeah.
But I said, sure. What shocks me is that I never tell them initially, hey, this is Chuck, the owner of Mission Mercantile. I just say, hey, this is Chuck at Mission Mercantile. I'm calling you about this. And we just talk. We just talk. And sometimes it kind of comes and they go, well, gosh, who's your manager? I want to tell you, I really appreciate the call. And I go, well, you're kind of talking to him. I'm the founder, I'm the owner. And they're shocked. And they
Yeah,
tell
I'm
us
sure.
they're
I would
shocked that
be.
they even got a call,
Hmm.
much less from, the person who, founded the company. And it's like, that's shocking that's shocking. That's sad that
Mm.
that's that rare.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
and if there's one thing that I could share to any business owner that's out there is put yourself out there in that way, put your team out there in that way,
Mm.
and understand that's how you one of the things you can do. There's quite a few others, but one of the things you can do to become mythical, at least in that one customer's mind, at that one time, at that one moment, be
Yeah.
that person for them to let them know that they really mattered.
Yeah. And I'd also argue too, like, even though in the moment that's when you're establishing that relationship, having that conversation, that goes way beyond that moment, right? It
Of
stays with
course
someone.
it
Yeah.
does. It stays with them forever because, fortunately for us, mythical customer care is one of the things that we build our company around, and there's not much of it out there. That's why when I coined the phrase mythical, I didn't coin customer care, obviously, but by mythical, it was like it's like that unicorn, that one thing that we all dream about.
Hmm.
They go in the restaurant or the apparel store or picking up a hamburger or whatever we're doing. We just want it to be mythical. I mean, at least they tell us, thanks for coming.
Yeah. Right.
How often do you hear that? It's like that cost you nothing, you
Yeah.
know?
Not as
So
often as you should.
yeah.
I'm
So I
sure.
think I think we're safe in our mythical.
I think so too, just from this past hour of
But
chatting
if
with you.
not, I hope everybody listening will take that one little nugget and say, how can I be mythical? You
Yes,
know,
I know there are many nuggets in this episode, so I hope our listeners take them all. I know we're at time, so thank you so much, Chuck. It has been an
you're
absolute
welcome.
pleasure to chat with you. Um, Everything that you said, it makes sense just from an outsider looking in. And I can't wait to watch you all continue to succeed.
Well, thanks, Mariah. It's been my honor and my pleasure.